On this episode of the Kilted Filker Workshop, we are going to talk about one of the most important parts of siege combat, at least in the Society for Creative Anachronism, and that is the siege bolt. This is a standard SCA combat siege bolt. It has been used in multiple battles, in multiple wars, and we are going to make one today. But first, if we're going to go over some background information. So if you already know what a SCA siege bolt is, you already know the variants of it, then feel free to skip ahead. But for those of you who are watching this video, I'm assuming you are new to siege, or you do not have a full background, or else you would already know how to make a siege bolt. So, the standard SCA siege bolt, first off, must be over 50% yellow. The reason for that is so that the heavy fighters in the field, when they get hit by it, they see yellow, they know siege. Because the rules for siege are different from throwing weapons or other forms on the battlefield. The bolts must be at least 48 inches in length. They must have a tag with it with your name and your kingdom, preferably a household. That is so while you're at an event such as Penzic War or another big event, they know who shot it, or even afterwards, they know who to give it back to. The head of it also must be mostly yellow. It is made out of foam. It must have at least 1 inch of progressive give to it. That way, when it hits you, it will give a little. This particular bolt happens to be about 52 inches long, and I will explain why. Some people will cut the 4 inches off the end, or they may just start with a shorter shaft. I keep mine at 52 just because why not? All of my bolts come in at under a pound. That is a key piece of any siege combat. Each type of siege ordnance, whether it is a bolt, whether it's a tennis ball pyramid, or whether it is a large boulder, can only weigh up to 1 pound, and that is 16.00 ounces. If they weigh this and it comes in at 16.01, they will fail you and you will have to remove some weight. This one was measured at 15.2, so my design is well within limits. This was a design that I came up with on my own after looking at a number of different designs out there. I will link my source material to this video. I also did a bunch of testing and came up with what I thought was an optimal design. One thing that I will note is whatever design you go with, you want to be consistent across all of your bolts. And the reason for that is muscle memory. Because if you have different sets of bolts that fire differently, that work differently, you will be training yourself on how to miss, essentially. So the more consistent they fire, the more accurate and, well, better you will be. So let's talk about some variants that other folks do that I don't, or I changed. What some people will do on the head is they will round over the head and then insert halfway tennis ball with a hole through it. Some people think that that makes it a little bit more rigid. Some people think it makes it fly better. I originally did not do that on my first bolt because I thought it would be too hard. One of the rules about SCA combat siege is your ammo, when shot at a 45-degree angle, cannot fly further than 80 yards. The reason for that is really safety. This being a 1-pound projectile with a blunted front, if you're able to shoot this 80 yards, if I shoot you at the minimum distance of 10 yards, it can hurt. And so I felt that I didn't want to put a tennis ball on here. Also, I'm lazy. In order to get that to fit is a lot more work than just simply rounding off the end and taping over it. Also, if I have enough tennis balls for all of my siege ammo, I'd rather make siege pyramids with that I can use out of my larger engines. So again, that's a personal choice. Some people like it, some don't. All right, let's talk about the fletching. The fletching, as you can see, is a pool noodle, and I only have one. What many people will do is that they will actually take insulation for a small pipe, wrap it in duct tape, and then set it on both sides. They will then chamfer the wings in, or the front of it in, and so your siege bolt will fly like a cruise missile. Many people have been very successful with that design, and it works for a lot of people. Um, but me being the engineer, I wanted a rifle flight. So the first thing I did is I took that design and I simply rotated each of them. So now when my bolt flew, it spun. And I found that that rifle flight gave me much more accuracy, because one of the issues is that these shafts come from a coil of Siloflex or other makers, and they will want to sometimes banana, especially if you are launching and you haven't waxed down your siege engine properly. The back end will be moving further than the front end, and I've watched this in the slow motion, where this will actually bend in the siege engine chamber itself. And what happens if you have a siege bolt flying this way with a bend in it, it acts like a canard, and you'll see them. They'll fly about halfway, and all of a sudden they'll veer off in one direction. And what I saw is, once I put in a rifled spin on this, even if the middle bulged, the front and back flew in line, and then the bulge would simply rotate. So again, that was my choice. Does that take a little bit of energy out of the bolt? Yes. So I then tuned up my engines a little bit to get the distance. Now, why am I using a single fletch that's a pool noodle and not the insulation? Well, for two reasons. The first is, in addition to the standard Docmo, I also use Roman torsion ballistas. And because of that, if I had the two fletchings, depending on the design, they wouldn't fit. When I have my Class A, which is capable of shooting 5 of them, if I had the fletching on the side, it would make the actual chamber very large and impractical. And so I started to experiment with a single fletch and a larger fletch. This works. This is simply a pool noodle cut at a 45 degree. I then, let's see if you can see it on that view, I then chamfer it in a channel, so then when I attach this to the shaft, it's now sitting in a channel and is not going to rotate this way. It's one of the things I found with that older design, is that a lot of the fletching would want to twist a little, including in flight. And so if your fletching isn't tight, oftentimes you would see very erratic behavior. So that's essentially why I did the design I did. Once we get to actually making it, one thing I will point out is this bolt has got a single band of black Gorilla Tape right around here where the highest forces are. That is to reinforce this. But what I also learned is, by doing that, this became really strong, and then this area compressed. So something that I will be experimenting with is putting additional black tape up here, maybe in smaller bands, so it will still compress. But we're not going to do that today. So that being said, let's get to making. So what you need in order to make one is, first you need a shaft. This one is approximately 48 inches. I uncoiled it from a 100-foot section of Siloflex and cut it about to length. You will need a measuring tape. Sometimes I'll use a measuring tape, sometimes I'll use a T-square. It all depends on my preference and my mood. A Sharpie or something so you can mark the shafts where you have to. You will need 3/4 inch strapping tape and 2-inch strapping tape. You must use strapping tape, right? If you look at it, it's got the various stripes in it. You do not just want to use clear packing tape. That will fail. You will need yellow tape. There's 2 types of tape that I use. One is your standard duct tape, where it's got that mesh backing material, and the other one is a 3M vinyl material. The rules don't state you have to use duct tape. What I found about this is it's lighter, but it's also more expensive. And so if I have a bolt or I have something that I'm worried about the weight, I will use this instead of this, but both work. For my design, you will need some Gorilla Tape. Again, one roll will do, dozens, if not 100 or more bolts. You're not going to run out of this. You're going to need 2.5-inch leather discs. There are people that will actually use 2 discs, and I'll talk about that when I get to that section. I use one, and this works fine for me. I bought this online. I will provide the link for that in the description as well. Um, Here's the package. You will need, I've got two types of um, pool noodle that I'm using for the head. The one is a solid 2.5 inch. The other one is a 2.5 inch with a 1 inch bore in it. I could have just bought more of this and then drilled. That's what I did for my original set of 60. But then when I was shopping online and I found one that was the same dimensions, the same exact material, just had the 1 inch hole. Again, I'm lazy. If I can save myself time, I'm going to do it. You will then need a secondary pool noodle. This is for the fletching. I could have made it out of the same black. I just went with purple for two reasons. One, last summer when I started to experiment with this, I happened to have purple pool noodles. But then purple is also one of the colors of the East Kingdom in the SCA. And so I said, hey, purple's nice. And then that way I would always know my ammo on the field by the fletching. Some people, again, knowing what your ammo is on the field, if we do have an event with gleaning where you can pick up on the field, makes it a lot easier to recognize yours. Some people will add striping to their bolts. Some people will add other decorations so you can tell their bolt from a distance. Again, I chose purple because why not? And one last thing that you'll need is a drill. This has got a 1.25 inch round sander thingy on it. That is so I can then take these pieces and sand this groove in. For the actual assembly, I'm going to use one pre-sanded because this will get everywhere, and well, I'm filming, so let's not make that much of a mess. And that's it. What you will need to do ahead of time is take your solid pool noodle and cut it into 4-inch lengths, right? And you will need enough lengths for every bolt you have. You generally then want to add an additional couple because you may have mistakes, right? You may have an issue. And then chamfer one end of it. That is so when you tape it up, it's not a hard square edge. For the pool noodle with the 1-inch hole, you want to cut it into a 2-inch length and then chamfer the edge just as you did this one. Okay, so let's get started. Take your shaft and measure 1.75 inches down. And there is a reason why we are using that measurement, as you will see, hopefully, in a minute. What I will generally do is I will line this up and then just mark it 1.75 inches in a couple of places just so I can see it. This does not have to be an exact, precise measurement. You are just want to be in the ballpark. So, step 2. Don't fall. You want to take your 3/4 inch strapping tape and you want to form a loop over the end so that it goes beyond that 1.75 inch mark. You'll also notice here I've got 2 scissors before I forget. This was this pair of scissors I used in making my first batch. They will get gunky, so make sure you've got de-gunker, de-schmitzifier, whatever it is, or your wife or lady friend or partner or whatever are going to get really mad when you mess up a whole bunch of scissors. So, first thing I'm going to do now is just cut this. Generally, it's going to take 3 passes where you want the ends to touch each other. Now, the reason why we are doing this is that we are providing a moisture barrier so that if water gets in the back end of this, it will not break this barrier and then get the foam and the insides of your head wet. If that happens, your bolt could now weigh more than a pound. And if that happens, you will not be able to use it. And so we want to keep the head dry. Now, obviously, if you're storing your ammo, you want to store them with the head up. That way, if it does rain, the rain will hit the head and will not go into the underside. Once you have this layer down, you want to take your 3/4 inch tape, align it to that 1 3/4 inch mark, and then wrap it around. You want to have this come out about 1/4 inch or so, maybe a little more. This is providing the base for the head. So go ahead and apply a liberal amount. The strapping tape itself does not weigh much, so wind it up until you have at least about 1/4 inch. And I'm doing a really good job, so internet, don't shame me too much. So while I do this, I will talk a little bit about SiloFlex. Likely I will make another video where I show you how I unroll the SiloFlex and make it straight. If you link to the SCA documentation on Siege, it gives the specifics for the tubing. The yellow tubing itself is a gas pipeline 100 psi tubing. It also comes in a 160 psi, and you can also get water tubing, which is black. If you happen to get the water tubing, just be careful that you have to cover the shaft in yellow tape, but then make sure that the information that talks about the properties of the tube are visible. If it is black, the marshals will inspect it. Well, they will inspect it anyway, but they will want to see that number. So, again, I've got, okay, maybe this is a little less than 1/4 inch on here. So I'll cut this off. End of step 3. Now I will take my 2-inch piece with the chamfered end down. Now, one thing to note, this pipe is 1.25 inches and this is 1 inch, because this will stretch and you want to have a tight connection. This being 2 inches and that being 1 3/4 inches, I like to leave that 1/4 inch just in case there's any play. This is not going to slam up against effectively the rest of it. So I stuff this on. So that it is a nice tight fit. Again, actually, that is fairly fairly flat. Then you take your leather 2.5 inch thing and you place it like so. Now you will need your 2-inch tape, and in this case it's a new roll, so let me cut this end off. And you are then going to tape the bottom half of this to the shaft. What I'm going to do is use 3 strips where the ends touch each other, and I want the bottom of this to go about here, because I will then come back and wrap this so that this part is nice and tight. And what I've also found helpful is if I cut the strips ahead of time. If you cut these a little long, don't worry about it. You can either trim it when you are done, because again, this strapping tape is very light and will not affect your overall weight. So the purpose of this leather, one, it's to take the force from the siege bolt hitting its object and spread it out. And also, should this break free of this, it will hit this and not the foam. So, simple. First piece. It's on. I didn't exactly do it in the middle, and I need better glasses. That happens. Which is why I found 3 pieces work. So, what you're going to do with your second piece is you're going to line it up with the edge, press it against here, and then line the other edge up with the first piece. So now you've got two pieces that overlap each other. And then you take a third piece and you cover what's left. Now, some people might take a strap of the 3/4 inch and wrap it around there. I'm not going to, just because simply the next step is you take this guy and you place him on top. Now, in case you haven't made this quite level, you may need to spin this around a little bit until now your tip is basically straight. So again, you're going to take the same three bits of 2-inch tape. And you're going to cut 3 of them. When I make multiples of these in an assembly line, I will oftentimes make a lot of the same step at the same time because it's just sometimes easier and quicker. But, well, this is a video showing you how to do one, so we're just going to do one. Timber! Y'all didn't see that. So, I'll start with my first piece, and in about the middle of it, I will lay it on top of here. I then stick this, again, I'm setting it on top of the leather, and then I pull it down. And as you can see, I did a really good job of centering this. The extra we can trim off. I then take another piece, find about the middle of it. Now, again, the importance of the strapping tape here. The strapping tape is strong and it will hold this together. And then you take the third piece of strapping tape, you now have a head that is now one piece. I am going to cut this off because that will actually affect flight because it's sticking so far down. So I'll then come back with my 3/4 inch and wrap the base of this. Now at this point I want this tape to be tight because you want it to compress against the tape and you want it to keep in place, and just 2 or 3 times around is enough, right? Whatever works for you. So the next step, of at least what I do, some people will tape it up differently. I will then take my 2-inch tape, and I have a fold here. Let's ignore that piece. And I will also wrap it this way. And I want to make sure I have some places where the tape goes over itself, and then I'll select a different point. So I will rotate this so the seam between the tape is not at the same spot. And what I found here is, again, 3 is your magic number. Yes, I am beyond graceful tonight. Well, it's been a long day and the Eagles won, so I'm in a good mood. So now your siege bolt should look like this, where you've got strapping tape both going around and around, and around the bottom. Now, this is where I will take that Gorilla Tape, and I'm going to, again, this is a 2-inch roll, so I will try to get the middle of the roll right here where that leather strap is. That way I'm reinforcing this. Now, for this particular video, I'm not going to put any up top, but I will be experimenting with this, so expect some sort of update on the testing with different types of Gorilla Tape. As an aside, being the engineer that I am, you will notice a lot of videos on my channel where I am experimenting. And the reason for it is Sometimes you don't know what's going to work well until you actually make it and try it. There were some designs, in talking about siege engines, that I thought would work well, but then when I actually built it, it didn't. And so I'm a big fan of try it and see how it works. Um, so I then squeeze the Gorilla Tape in. At this point, all we have to do is add the yellow coating. To be clear, the strapping tape is meant to take all of the forces. This yellow tape really is for decoration. It's not meant to be structural, even though it will take some of the load. Um, Again, this is so that the heavies and anyone else knows that this is yellow, or that this is a siege engine. So we're going to make the same lengths that we did before, exact same concept, where we're going to take 3 pieces of tape um, with overlapping ends. So you take your duct tape, you put it down, and cut. So there's piece 1, press it flat. And then second piece. And I will show you, actually, notice here how I slightly take that edge and I cover the other side. Then when I wrap this around, I want this piece, this edge, to align to that piece. And I sort of buggered up the top here, so hopefully the third piece will cover this. I know, I am the most graceful host on YouTube. Deal with it. So, third piece, same thing. At this point, you just want to make sure that the entire head is covered. Now, we are almost done. Again, what I will do here is you just want to make sure that this is compressed, this is in. I will then take this and wrap the bottom so that the tape does not come out. Sometimes, depending on my mood, I will also wrap this down a couple of rows. And there you have it. The front of an SCA compliant head is now complete. The simple way to test this is if I push down on this, it will give. But notice how it's giving right up until here. That's because this is where that black Gorilla Tape is, which is why, again, I'll be doing some experimenting. Do I add some strips in here just to reinforce this piece? The reason why that is a concern is at Penzic 50, when I rolled out this ammo for the first time, towards the end of the week, one of the marshals looked at some of my tips and noticed that they were a little floppy, for lack of a better term. So it was clear that I could use some reinforcement. Now, could I have just wrapped it in more of the strapping tape? Yes. Could I have wrapped it in more of the duct tape? Yes. Again, that's why we experiment. So, this part is done. As we say in the business, it's never just the tip. Now, let's talk about the back end. So I have my piece of fletching, and you can see that there's a groove here. I'm just going to simply attach this here. One of the things that I do, because I'm an engineer and I can't help myself, is I will actually figure out where the center point of this is. And that's just by simply putting it on a pencil and seeing where it tips. And then how does that relate to the actual center of this 52-inch bolt? And the reason for that is what's called front of center. So anyone who's done archery, anyone who makes arrows knows if your arrow is slightly front of center, then your bolt, when it flies, will want to tip over and give you a nice graceful arc. One of the things that I've seen on many siege bullets is they'll fly like this. right? And they'll fly in some weird pattern. Um, so, and in fact, you could see that black stripe here. That tells me where the center is. Um, and so that helped me judge it. So one way of adjusting that is adjusting where you put the fletching. I'm not going to go through that process now. The the attachment of the fletching is really simple. In fact, I should probably use glue or some sort of better way. But I will take the 3/4 inch strapping tape, and I will start a strand. Hold this in place, and then wrap a number of times. Um, and I found that, believe it or not, that works. It is simple. It is effective. I know that there are some folks who worry about what to do about this hole, um, but for my design, I don't really care. Um, Let the hole let air through it. The whole point of this is you want to make it aerodynamic. Well, not aerodynamic, but you want it to hit the air. Um, in some cases, right, I might tape the front of this over if I wanted this to be a bigger contact area. But one of the things I found with these is that when you launch them, they will start to spin as soon as aerodynamics takes effect. One of the interesting things about an arrow is when you launch it, the first phase of launching, it's pure kinematics, right? It's pure just the launch energy of this. And because this is so blunted, right, the air hasn't hit this yet. But by having such a large fletch back here, the air hits it sooner and it starts to rotate sooner. Some of you who have been doing siege for a while with the standard fletching or with smaller fletching, right, will notice it'll actually fly further before it kicks in. One thing that I will note is you don't need fletching. The rules state that your ammo just has to fly straight or kind of straight. So I have seen some bolts without fletching. It will actually pass if you do not have fletching on it. However, if your fletching is loose, they will fail you. I always have fletching because I've seen really weird things happen when I don't. The fletching also helps to stabilize it because the drag of it will help keep this in line. But there you go. This only took a couple of minutes. When I cut this into 4-inch sections and that into 2, I'll literally take a bandsaw, set up a stop at 4 inches, and just, cut, 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 cut. So the process of making the parts is pretty quick. On these, I literally set up a bandsaw, right, or set up a same stop. I forget what I had measured that out, and then just fed the pool noodle in at a 45 degree. Same thing on this, right? You set it at 2 inches, and then cut, cut, cut. Found it to be very effective. But there you go. I'm sure some of you have got ideas and better ways of making your siege ammo. I welcome them. Please feel free to leave any comments or suggestions. For those of you purists who are offended that I'm using a pool noodle instead of the insulation, well, there you go. Thank you.